Alright, challengers, make an art tutorial. How to draw in your style. It's going to be some breakdown, some images with occasional visuals, a demo piece with commentary or a video format. Okay, let's go along. Process breakdown, pretty open-ended. Okay. I do have some bullet points. That being like 4. So this is going to be quite rambly, but I do have these bullet points to help me out a little bit. So hopefully I don't have to edit as much. I guess I could start with the tools. I use just a default G Pen here in Clip Studio Paint. How about I assume that you already have like basic drawing skills? Yeah, that's good. I can assume you have basic drawing skills. So you just want to, you have your own skills already. You have your own style, and this tutorial is to emulate my style. Okay, how I think of my proportions. Let's see. So yeah, you just pull this image up. How many heads tall? Yeah, 4 heads is good. I usually think of my characters in 4 heads tall. This is actually just a little bit taller because of the hair. I often hear them described as like chibi-esque proportions, which I didn't even realize I was doing that until somebody told me that. But I think one thing you keep in mind when you draw like this is that the shoulders are always more narrow than the head and the hips. I think that gives it more of a like a cute feminine sort of look. If you make the shoulders like way out here, it looks more masculine. And if I were to draw a male figure, it would be, the shoulders would be out more, and the pelvis would be more narrow. And I also think people describe my lines as thick, like thick lines. But I don't actually think they're not really thick for me, because I'm using 3.0 here, and these are pretty thin. I could be wrong. It's maybe I'm just drawing on a smaller scale. So thicker lines actually seem thin. But I think what people really mean, again, I could be wrong, is that they're like that. It's confident. They're not really sketchy at all. And I think how you should achieve that look is simplifying the angles, simplifying the outlines, the contours. How can I provide an example for that? I'm trying to think of an example of what's like the opposite of that, but I don't really have much experience with that, so that's probably an area I should work on, to be honest. When I think of my art, I think of it in kind of like a vector sort of way, even though I have no experience with vectors or really know that much how they work. But an example of that is, like, let's just take this sort of like clump of hair. I think of it like, here's one point, here's another point, and here's the third point. And there's a line between here and here. And what I do is I know that there's supposed to be a curve here, so I just curve from there to there. And then same over here. And some curves are more extreme than others. But what I don't do is, let's take this cow look here, is something like that. You could put that there. However, to get that more angular look, you have to, I guess, like, increase the amount of points there are. So you got these 3, and there's one more that connects to there, and you have to say, okay, this can be an angle here with curved lines. So that versus that. I'm trying to figure out what I do, like, in the process of explaining it, because it's just, teaching's hard is my point. Alright, I think what I'm trying to say is that my style is really, I think of it really graphically, like it's kind of like a webcomic style where it's supposed to be like really fast to do. And it's supposed to be you're supposed to be able to draw the character on model like multiple times in a row very easily. So there's this bang, I mean not this bang, this whatever this is always like, there's always a line like this. It always lines up with something. Like this part of the hair always lines up with that curve there. So I think it's really designed to be easier to draw, while actually not being the easiest thing to draw. This hairdo has been kind of my enemy for the past like 6 months that I've been drawing this character. But yeah, I've actually, let me pull that up. Alright, so this is very old, so it doesn't look the best. But this is a turnaround I did of this hairstyle, and I did this because it's really difficult for me to draw it in different angles, while it's like, to keep it cartoonish, because this like little lip here, when you turn around, it just kind of flips. So while you are thinking of it in 3 dimensions, you also have to think about it in 2 dimensions. But you see this is like, there's a point there, and you go back, it's the same. It's always the same. And sometimes maybe if it's like a close up and has more details, there can be a little bit of loose hairs in there, but the form underneath is always the same. There's probably something salvageable in that ramble, so let's go to the colors. Colors. I've been using these colors to be honest, I just kind of color pick from my previous characters, from my previous drawings. But let's say I need to add another element. How about that? Let's add another element. Let's get a green cube. We need a green cube here. So, okay, this cube needs to be green. Let's go under. Okay, what? Green. And that's not working. Okay, that doesn't look very good. What I usually do, actually, it looks fine, but I usually just go in the middle here, in this color wheel. Let me make it bigger. And pick something in the middle. And most of the time, if you go, like, maybe desaturate it a little, if like the main color is the opposite of it. See, there's a lot of purple in this character, and that's the opposite of green. So I tend to desaturate opposites a lot to make it a little more pleasing to the eyes. And it's kind of difficult to see for me if this actually looks fine, because there's not a lot of background details, but at the very least you can start with that. Start with something a little more desaturated, and the closer you get to this magenta here, which is like my main color, I sort of saturate a little bit more until I get here, which I can actually, although I don't always follow that rule exactly, I just, most of the time I start with that, and if I think I can go more bold, I try it, and if it doesn't work, I go back. So if I think I can get away with that, and for that to look alright, I just sort of stick with it. And I'm just kind of analyzing my own work, and I tend to get a lot of colors up here, like up in the very light part. There's a lot of, what's it called? There's a lot of luminosity. Very bright colors. This should be, yeah, it's basically right up to the brightest it can be. And you yourself can just go into my work and then color pick everything and see for yourself that it's all like up there. And sometimes it goes down a bit, but it never goes too far. It never really goes past that middle part, except in the line work, because you don't want to overpower the line work with some black part here. Alright, lighting. I think this is more interesting than what I tried to talk about for the past 20 minutes I've been recording. So lighting. I use a layer for the lighting, and the shadow, and a layer for the highlight. Which I used to include more highlights down here, but I kind of just did it for the hair. I think it looks a lot cleaner. For the shadow, I use the blending layer multiply. You go up here to blending mode. If you're using a different program, you can there's probably something like that, and multiply. And what you do is, let me get rid of this so I can just show you how to do it. New layer. Enable clip to layer below, because we'll just get this as a placeholder. If I have this layer not clipped to the color layer, actually, first of all, oh, this is just a gray layer that's just kind of, I fill in the line art, and I add another clipping layer to that, a clipping mask, so I could just color without going outside. So I could just do that, and when I enable this, it's all inside. Alright, just to clear that up. So you got this layer, it's just a normal red layer. Let's say I'm just shading this. This is all in shadow. I go to this clip to layer below here, and it only appears in the colored area. And you go here, you go multiply. It is now acting as a shadow. Let's get a little bit of a lighter color. It's like a red shadow. And you can just paint the shadow anywhere. Like under there. But usually what color I go for is more of a cool color, like blue or something. And if you don't know what I'm doing here, I'm going up here, edit, and then I press H on my keyboard, and it fills in this entire layer with the color I have selected. So all that's in shadow. And usually what I like to do is I just have a lasso fill right here. It just fills in whatever I'm lassoing. I like to fill my entire area that I'm shading with shadow, and then add a mask here. And then click on the mask, and then press delete. Therefore, it doesn't matter what color I have selected here. I don't have to find that color again. I can just paint shadow with any color selected. So you can just paint that. Let's paint that. I usually shade elements like this in the background, like fully. I know there might be some light on here, but it just simplifies it. Let's say the light's coming from that direction. Oh. Well, it's coming from this direction. I might have like this sort of thing. And since it's coming from the top, I like to have just one line there of shadow. It just looks a little more. It's a very graphic thing. It's not graphical thing. What's the word? It's definitely stylized, but that's not the word I'm looking for. Anyways, let's turn this off for now until I get to that. Maybe have this in the shadow. It'd feel kind of weird to just have that filled in if the light's coming from there. So I'm just gonna do that, and maybe your head is obstructing this part a little bit, so I'm putting shadow there. And this neck, the neck is usually always in shadow, especially since they have this sort of turtleneck thing going on. Which in that case, this part, I am picturing this as its own form. Understanding the forms of your character is you cannot do without that. I don't know why I'm saying this. I just said in the beginning that I'm assuming you have basic drawing abilities. I guess whatever. I'll just keep going. So I know this, and if this were a 3D model, it's also something that helps too. Imagining things as 3D models and the vector points. If you know, the way a 3D model works is it just holds these points as numbers. And this point is correspondent to a coordinate. 1, 2, 3. X, Y, Z. On the in like a 3D place. And each of these hold a different set of numbers. And I imagine this, even though this probably goes all the way back there, I imagine this is like a point there, a point there, a point there, point there, point there. Or maybe it's like down here. So this is a plane right here. Like that. It's definitely going to be in shadow because the light's coming from here. As opposed to this plane. It's probably not exactly how this plane looks, but it's close enough. There may be some like obstruction with her head down there. And you could just shade this whole area, because you could argue that she just has a big head. Her head just shading the whole thing. Like, that doesn't look bad, but I like to have some more definition here. Maybe a little bit here. Definitely some in the back here. I think I'm so interested in describing this neck and like collar area because I don't really understand it myself that well. So I feel describing it a lot is helping me understand it too. But yeah, this is a little bit of cloth going there. I think you might get my point. I usually like to have the dress just have lines of shadow going down and filling them in. It's just a simple, fast way of doing it. And if there's an element like this where it's like too small it's like kind of difficult to get the sort of just like triangle here, I don't even bother. I just kind of fill it in, and it looks fine. Because when you zoom out, you can't really notice it at all. Like this, I shouldn't have done this. I should have just filled it in. And you can do that with a lot of elements. If it's just too complicated or too difficult, you have to simplify it. You have to simplify it for it to look good. Not only is it just faster, it just looks better. Usually, specifically with this character, I just fill that all in. That's part of like just filling it in to make it simple. Like there's this big shape here, and this shape that's behind it. So I just think of it as behind it, and it sometimes is kind of awkward if the light is coming that way. However, I still usually fill it in with shadow. It just contributes a lot more to the graphic look. And I'm thinking this color is a little bland. Maybe it's fine in some environments, but I'm thinking on its own, it's looking all bland. So I like to go a little bit to the. You can. This is just like a personal choice. Like you can do anything basically, but as long as it's like in this area, it should be a fine color choice. So you can even go darker if you want. Like really, really, really dark shadows. Those can still look cool. I usually just stick up here. It's usually fine enough. Ooh. Let's see, what did I choose before? Oh, and a little tip, if the white of your eye is completely like 100% white, you can just click on the shadow here to get the shadow color. It's the exact same as if you were to disable the multiply. And then pick from there. Alright, I chose very middle there. All the way down. Okay. It really doesn't matter too much. It's a little darker. It complements the color scheme of her clothes. And I just chose kind of a yellow for. But yeah, highlights. Highlights are done through the same way. You provide a clipping mask, and then you choose overlay as the blending mode. And for my style, I just kind of. Here's where the light's hitting, and then here's the highlight across the hair. You could like. I used to kind of just like erase certain parts to give the impression that there is like different strands of hair and some parts are in shadow. Recently, I've just been doing this to simplify it. I think it looks all right. Oh, and if there's like a circular or like a spherical object, I just kind of provide one. I put one highlight there. All right. Hopefully, there is some parts in there that were useful. Last thing I'm going to talk about with these is sometimes. Let's get this back. Sometimes, not always, and I don't think even you need to do this. It's just in my pursuit of copying literally everything Charles Darnley does. I also paint the lines, and you might have not even noticed there, but I just enabled a layer that makes the lines painted. So I have a clipping mask here. These are all the lines. This group has all the lines in it, and this clipping mask is over all of that. And you can see this is not completely black. It is a little bit lighter than black. Sort of a bluer color. It's usually better with blue and stuff because shadows usually look better as a cooler color. And you can see it here. Any lines that are like inside the form, I take with. Let's add another one so I can show you. So these lines are really harsh. These lines on her skirt and on her sweater. So what I do is I pick the color that they're next to, and lower the opacity by 50. And then I paint over that. And I feel it just makes it a little bit easier to look at. And usually if it's this where it's lighter and darker, I usually go with the darker. Because if you choose a lighter color, it looks really weird next to the shadow. And I just think it looks easier on the eyes. It's very subtle, you probably don't even need to do it. But, oh yeah. Blue color. I can select all of that. Control-Shift-I to invert my selection. Fill it in. Now it's all this color. I'd be willing to answer questions if anybody wants to ask that. But I do want to move on. Because I know this seems like a lot. However, this is actually very simple. Because I did touch on the two very important elements. Which is... Well, one very important one, which is lighting, which is really the whole difficulty of a scene like this. So I do have the time lapse of this pulled up, so I can commentate over that. So I start with this is actually, if you could see, there's a thumbnail under this that I scaled up and made. I made bigger is scaled up. I started in the middle of cleaning up that and making a little bit of warp perspective here. Let's see if we can show anything about that. If I just screenshot this, put it in. Let's see, where's the horizon line? Somewhere over here. Sort of. It's actually... Oh, yeah. No, it's like right here. This horizon line is right here because we're here. The thing with warp perspective is you could treat these stairs, at least I did, I treated these stairs like cylinders. There's the big cylinder right there. And we are definitely looking over top this. We can see the top of the cylinder, we are above that cylinder. And if the cylinder is like this, we are looking at the very middle of the cylinder. So that's a horizon line. And if it looks like this, we are under it. So I kind of applied the same logic to these stairs. I know that as it gets further from the horizon line, the more this curve is pronounced. The more this curve is the curvier the curve. And I kind of followed this. This was kind of, I didn't really have any, it just kind of felt right, like curving this little support post here. I didn't really know if that curved, but it looked alright. So I went along with it. And these grid, wall tiles, those are also curved. You try to keep everything pretty gestural and loose. Even when drawing a environment that's, you would imagine be pretty rigid, like a industrial, like subway entrance like this. I still think of it like I'm drawing a character where there's just a line there. I don't use this too often because that can look very devoid of life, even though it's supposed to be kind of an area like that. But it just gives you the environments a lot more personality. As you can see, the sketch is pretty ugly right now. I'm not really thinking about how to make a face look good because that's going to be later when the facial expression of your character is going to be affected by its environment. Even though I probably spent a little too long on this, regardless, because as you'll see later, I even changed this face, so I probably should just put a cross there. Let's see, it's easy to look at like something like a mossy ground and be totally lost in the amount of like little tiny leaves and grass and what even is on moss? They're not leaves. It's not like mold or anything. It's just moss. A little bit of fuzz on the moss. Easy to get distracted by details. That's my point. Let's say you have a boring cube. Alright, here's a boring cube. That cube is really boring. I don't like that cube. This cube is not very good. Now, What material is this cube? Let's say the cube is just like kind of the material of this environment I'm drawing here. Kind of concrete, decaying, post-apocalyptic cube. So, how do we make this look more derelict? This is where reference comes in. This is where reference comes in. I don't know what I was going with that. I don't know where I was going with that. I'll probably continue that. There might be something there. Let's give it a shot. Alright, this cube is going to be awesome. This cube is going to be the best cube I've ever seen. How about I just do it and not describe how I do it and just do it. And I'll commentate what I'm thinking when I'm doing it. How about that? Yeah, I tried to like, oh, I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna do before I do it. And I don't actually know how to tell you what I do. I only know how to do it. So I'm just going to do it and see what happens. So let's do it. So yeah, I'm gonna round off these corners. I'll just tell you what I'm doing. How about that? If it's made out of concrete, it's probably something that's cast or cut. And if it's old, the corners are the weakest part. They've probably like broken away. So there's gonna be some little things there. It's worn down. Maybe it's like in the grass. How about that? It's on like a grassy thing. So I'm just kind of imagining vegetation as this simple shape of like these leaves. And I'm still kind of learning how to make this look random. Let's get a little bit of there. Maybe it's a little too high here. Let's bring this down. I'm still learning how to make this like look really natural. I am kind of just copying shapes from a piece like this. Like, oh yeah, you do that, and then they go back to my thing, and that's a new shape I could use. So I'm still learning the shape language. Shape language? That's not the word. I'm still broadening my creative library with stuff like that, because I get here and I find myself doing the same pattern over and over again. It doesn't look right. Let's do a big one here, and like, oh yeah, this I already did that, so I'm just gonna copy that, but that doesn't look right. So I'm gonna maybe do something different there. That looks good enough. It doesn't look the best, but I think it's good enough for the example. I get the point. So it's like, there's some back. It's like embedded in like some leaves. There's some in the middle. Got a little texture in there. There's little bits outside of it to kind of convey that it's not like a solid, just a block of solid thing. These leaves do fall off. Very loose material, and you see I kind of already added some texture here accidentally. This is rounded, so you just get rid of that little intersection. And maybe this isn't straight. There's a little bit of a decay in here. And one thing that Charles Donnelly does is he does these sort of shapes here. It's kind of like, sort of stains the concrete. The little like spherical stains. And you can later come and lighten up that line work so it's not so harsh. and maybe a little bit of a texture there. And you can add like different kinds of texture. You don't have to just do like these lines. You can maybe do squiggles or just scribbles. Maybe even little circles. You can do that. I actually like that better than the lines. Let's do that. It looks a little like cheese. And you can come along with some values. I'm not even gonna color this just for the sake of time. And you can come in and darken this to make it look more stain-y. This too. So yeah, now it definitely looks more derelict. And I just sort of do this with everything in my drawing. Here, that's not the right video. You see on this wall, I'm putting those little bubble stains, and in between the tiles of the concrete floor, I'm putting grass that's growing out of it. Put a shopping cart there, and just covered all the up. I'm just kind of side note, I'm just kind of describing this. I'm thinking of the shopping cart as a little like cube in the perspective of the horizon lines here. You'd look above the cube. You draw it like so. And I'm putting little bits of texture, even on the metal bits, that you wouldn't see as much wear as the concrete, just to make it look a little more alive. And like things have happened to it. It's not like sterile. It came right out of the factory. And even on these posters, I put a little bit of I don't know if you can see that. I put a little lip on that, so it's like coming off a little bit. These little bits of detail really help with giving the drawing a live character. Oh, okay. Let's go back. So, in this drawing, I have the first step, which is thumbnailing. That's even before this. Thumbnailing the lower opacity layer. And then I put down some lines. Which is basically another sketch, because I didn't have all of the elements in. And I find that it's fine if you have like a bunch of sketches before you do your line work. It doesn't have to be sketch, line work, bam, final line work. You can do multiple layers of it if you aren't feeling confident with starting the final line work yet. Because it does take a little longer, because you are just drawing the same lines over and over again at worst. But I find it helps. So after I'm confident that these are basically where I want the lines to be, I start with a little bit of value sketching. I would call it. There's probably another name for it, but I just throw on some darker grays to sort of figure out where I want the light to hit. And if later you can see, I did not end up going with this, but I was experimenting a little bit. Maybe the shadow can point to the character. That might have looked alright, but I ended up going with something else. Before you do any of the fancy color stuff, if you have a complex environment like this, it's really, really helpful to just sort of throw things out and throw things down there and see how things look. And the hardest part of this was definitely the lighting. And looks like I started going some final line work here. I had a little bit of trouble with their body there. Probably would have been fine if I just went with that sketch. I have some ideas, like maybe there's a person there they're running away from, but I ended up not going with that. And these things can change throughout the piece. I'm really just going over the lines I went over earlier, but like a lot cleaner. Oh, here. Here's actually a really important step, and I need to actually go back to the project file for this. Is layer management. I learned this after my first piece like this. I learned this after my first drawing like this, where I had a lot of elements, and it was just kind of character folder and background folder. And you realize pretty quickly that that is very slow and difficult to manage. So with this, let me turn off the effect layers. I would have these all in a folder, but the effects don't work if I do that. Let's see. I'll do that. I have all these elements in a different folder. So you got your this gate here, if you can see. Can I make these thumbnails bigger? You might be able to see it. This gate is its own folder. If I select this folder. Ooh. Or maybe, okay, I combine the gate and the sort of inside place in its own folder, but the gate has its own color layer, which is on top of the wall here in the ceiling. And this is all under the same lighting conditions. That's why I did it. So I could just light everything here. Frame. Okay, I said frame because it's kind of framing this whole scene here, which is actually a composition chip. You can just frame like what you want the audience to see. That's our Charles Dalmy thing, but anyways. Yeah, frame here. So it's sort of just a parallax in that there are elements, 2D elements over top each other. So that's over all of this. This is the top layer here, actually, where the cart, and all of that is the inside layer. Oh, the staircase is also inside layer. Inside, outside. Okay. I am kind of stumbling through this, but I hope you mostly get the point of that. They're just a bunch of 2D elements on top of each other, and because of that, you don't have to manage like, oh wait, what if I want to add? If I want to, let me undo all this. Actually, let me go like even deeper in that. Yeah, even these are like just 2D elements. This could easily be like a cardboard cutout of like a movie set or something. You could think of it like that. Actually, I'm gonna draw a little stand for this. Oh, that's a good idea. Maybe it's not. So yeah, they're just little, they're just pieces of your set that you put in over top each other to give the illusion of a 3D space. I'm gonna reload this project. And yeah, that's what I'm doing here. Instead of like doing all the color, I'm just putting it in gray to where I know inside here is going to be dark, so it doesn't really matter what color you make it. All it needs to do is you need a layer of some color that you could just select, and that's like, and everything you do is in that layer, and you can put a clipping mask over that, and etc. And you do that for every element that you think you need. Later on I even do it with these little individual plants. And this is these apartments are their own clipping layer, and these apartments and the background and the clouds, which I end up getting rid of. The characters, you get the point. There you go. I ended up changing the face a bunch because it didn't look good. I had some more details to the decaying of the staircase. I did have a little bit of trouble with this because I didn't quite know what color to make anything. Like, okay, the gradient looked alright, and I did want this to be blue and this to be... I came up with the idea. I wanted this to be more warm and this to be colder in hue. But then that would mean the light is spewing into here, making this warm by consequence. And I had a bit of references up there. So really what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of throwing colors down, seeing if it works. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just using a bunch of reference and my past experience to eventually come to the conclusion I need, which it requires a lot of trial and error. And I ended up going with this color. I was like, yeah, that looks alright. You can see me trying a bunch of stuff. And you just have to trust the process. When it looks like this, you're like, oh, that looks terrible. When it looks like that, you have to trust the process. At an early stage, you go like, yeah. I started darkening it, and I'm like, oh yeah, that looks alright. Making the apartments brighter. I think they look fine the way they were. Huh. Oh, I experimented with some like lights going through the leaves. It could have looked alright. Oh, I was experimenting with the sky being daylight instead of sunset. You should have to keep in mind where the light is hitting. And if you're gonna start with scenes like this, maybe don't go like too crazy, unless you are crazy. But there's a lot of, if you have what are they called? They're not environment lights. There's a term in filmmaking that describes lights that are in the scene, like a lamp, whatever that is. There's a lot of interaction if it comes from a certain point like this. So you have to keep in mind how that works, and you have to maybe simplify it a bit. Maybe there's something down here. And it goes onto the hat right there. There's a lot to think of. Oh, this step. Okay. This, I think it makes it... This step makes it look... It presents like the biggest change with very little effort. And that's because it's rendering. It's part of the rendering stage. But I just do the same thing I did for the character, where I select like this green color, at 50% opacity, paint the lines here. Makes it a little bit easier to look at. I'll do the same here on this part. Maybe make it a little lighter. You don't have to have 50%, but that's generally a good place to start. Sometimes I do a little more, like maybe I'll have 75 on these wall tiles here. Definitely have a little bit of on that hat here. You get the point. Alright, here's post-processing. These are kind of like post-processing effects where it's like a vignette. And that's really all it is. Except there's also elements coming from the lights that makes them... It gives them sort of a bloom if you know anything about how video game processing works. There's an effect called bloom. And it's just kind of like a cheap little glow effect. That's kind of what I'm doing here. You give them a little outline. And I'll show you what it looks like in the project. So I have a lot on this piece. You do not need that much. This is a very... I was still getting used to drawing like this, drawing these bigger drawings. Really, the only important bits. Whoops. All right. Really, the important bits you need to know are the multiply, and I use the kind of this bluer. I just kind of know that this is usually a good color to have a shadow with in certain scenes. That's not always the case, but I just kind of went with that and it worked. I have 2 of those for some reason. I could have just I can just merge those and it would look just the same. Hold. See what that is. Looks a little different, but yeah, I overcomplicated it a little bit, but it's generally you can just have one. And what that looks like, I actually didn't think about actually showing what that looks like, is if you took off all the effects, it was just a raw layer. It would just be like this, and you have a soft eraser, and you just sort of erase where you don't want the shadow to be, which is like outside. Then you multiply. It's even more intense. And then I have like a few overlay layers. Actually, I think that's all the multiply. I'm trying not to get too far ahead of myself. I experimented with this, that's not important actually. I do have a little bit of a corner. I kind of wanted this to just be like a corner, so I just kind of blurred that. Yeah, it's going into the darkness. Anyways, overlay. I have quite a bit of overlay layers because there's a lot of lights. So there's one big one here, you can see, which is I chose sort of just the opposite, sort of brighter color up here, and I took an airbrush and I just went like this. I'll make it bigger, show you what it looks like. It's very subtle, but it does a lot but I think it does a lot with okay, anyways. It does a lot with making it glow. It's very, very flashy. I don't even know what that is. That's an empty layer. That shouldn't be there. It's also probably another empty layer. Oh, it's the color of the flies because I got lazy. I didn't want to make it part of the parallax. It's cool. Another overlay, just the glow of the eyes. Because their eyes glow, and I sort of made that fall in line with the hair and stuff. I have a glow on this, even though I think it wasn't that great of a decision to have it reflect the sky. This drawing's very laggy. But I had a little glow there. I have a glow on here, on this robot's blue eye thing. And this blue eye casts light onto... It doesn't cast light, it projects... projects light onto the surroundings. And I'm just using a multiply layer here. I think that's really it for the... I think I kind of lacked touching on the fact that this is just a overlay layer that has the color of this. I just color picked from here and overlay onto this in the way I organize my scenes or my elements. Again, this is the same thing. You kind of play around with the color or opacity or whatever based on where it is. I could have probably cut off there, but whatever. I think that's good enough. This may seem like a lot, but I do, now that I've described all that, I do want to touch on this. My animations. Because now I only get to describe the animation part. I don't have to describe how I make the scenes or everything because I already did that. Let's do that. Okay. Now, time to switch gears a little bit to animation. You do all of what I've just described to make a scene. And you get to about, before a lot of the shading is done. Here. You get to here. Because I don't have a time lapse for this. because it's an animation. But the key to it is to get to here and not have much of lighting yet, because before you don't know what you're going to animate before it's drawn. You don't even know what in the thumbnail phase or the maybe you do know some elements in the thumbnail phase, but even in the sketch phase, because what I find helpful for me is I have to I wait till my phone vibrating. I wait till I get to here, and then I start making decisions about what elements I want to animate. And when I decide that, let's turn off the these layers. See, I have a lot less render effects here because I know how to do it better. Let's say the grass. I have the grass. I want to animate that. You have your file structure from your. If you've gone to here, you have the file structure that where all this is like in like a parallax sort of movie set. And I'm not just going to describe how to animate. There's a lot of there's all the principles of animation and everything, but assuming you already know how to animate things, you take each element and put it in its own animation folder here. And you can see this piece of grass here is just going up and down slowly. Yeah, it's right here. There's no real way to go to this part of the timeline without scrolling it and looking for the highlighted thing, because Clip Studio isn't that advanced with animation yet. But I have these elements here, or these, I don't know what to call them, but it's a set of frames. So these are all of the different frames in that one piece of grass blowing. And I take this. You could take this. You can select here, split clip, except here, and then you can take this, copy it, and paste it so it loops. Loops all around there. There's also no way to loop it without manually pasting it over and over again. So you have to do that. You do it with that. You do it with every single element here. And you put it over top other elements. And these pieces of grass have a lot of frames in them because they're very close to the camera. If you watch this flower here, it has a lot less. There's just 3 frames, and it's at a much lower frame rate. And that goes with smaller things like this little. I probably shouldn't. This probably wasn't necessary, but I animated a little bit of it's kind of blurry, but I animated that little bit of moss on that rock. Again, a bit much, but that would look cool. This is much less frames, much lower frame rate. And if you go all the way back here, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So the further something gets from the camera, the less you have to animate it. And that is the key to simplification in terms of animation. And obviously the character is like the focal point, so it has a lot of frames. Except not really, because her hair is something else, but her body is just 4. Let's try to select that. There should be 4 here. A lot of these are just duplicates of things that don't really need to exist. What? If you can see here, kind of talking for a while, so I'll try to keep this brief. You got 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's only using 4 of those layers. And this blank thing was left over from something I was trying earlier. I didn't really need them, so they're not being used. They're just kind of messy. I mean, they're just kind of there because I forgot to delete them, but I find it makes it a lot more, it gives a lot more personality if you trace the any animate objects in the scene. Even if they're stationary, you have to trace them to make them seem more animate. You see the rocks have no other frames because they're completely stationary. But really, it's just what I described in my scene in the previous drawing, but the elements are animated and looped. And you can see you also have to animate the shadows too. The shadow here is animated. You have another whole animation folder for that. The frames are stored in animation folders, and you can see here I just kind of put a gradient there and called it a day, so you don't have to animate that. You have to come up with compromises when animating things, because you can't fully render each frame. Sometimes you have to just go with it. You can see as a time saver, I only painted the lines for the skirt and the underside of her jacket, because if I were to do this and this, it would have taken forever. So I just kind of did the biggest areas. I think it's all my throat can handle for one day. So I'm going to call it there. And I hope you guys like it.